The restaurant was filled with laughter, the sound of forks touching plates, and the quiet background music that gave the evening a warm feel. People in elegant clothes sat at their tables, enjoying their food and talking about their lives as if nothing in the world could disturb them. But at one corner of the room, something was happening that would change the way Keanu Reeves looked at life, respect, and humility. It would begin with anger, the kind of anger that burns deep in the chest, but it would end with a lesson so powerful that it would inspire millions. Keanu had taken his mother to dinner. She loved simple evenings like this, not the fancy world of Hollywood premieres or big parties. She had raised him with kindness, with strength, and with endless sacrifice. And tonight, he wanted to do something that showed her how much he valued her. He booked a quiet table near the window where she could enjoy the lights of the city outside. His mother smiled as she looked around, her eyes soft, her hands folded gently in her lap. She looked at him with pride, as if her heart was full of gratitude for just being with her son. But then it happened. A waiter, young and impatient, walked to the table with an attitude that carried arrogance instead of care. He did not look at her with respect. He spoke in a tone that was sharp, almost careless, as if her presence meant nothing. When she asked for something politely, he rolled his eyes and muttered under his breath. She stayed calm, quiet, and gentle. But Keanu noticed every detail, every small gesture, every sign of disrespect. His mother's eyes lowered to her plate, pretending she did not notice. But he knew she felt the sting. At that moment, something inside Keanu's heart tightened. Anger rose like a storm. He clenched his fists under the table, his jaw tightened, and his chest burned. It was not just about bad service. It was about the way his mother was treated. The woman who had carried him through hardship, who had stood by him when life was cruel, who had given him love when the world gave him pain. To see her disrespected by someone who did not even know her story felt unbearable. The minutes stretched. He wanted to shout, to demand respect, to remind everyone in that restaurant who his mother was and what she deserved. But then he looked at her again. She was calm. Her hands were steady. Her face was gentle, as if she carried no anger at all. She smiled faintly at him, as if telling him without words, "Let it go. Do not carry this burden. Respect is not taken away by another person's rudeness. It lives inside us." Those unspoken words broke through the storm of his anger. He leaned back in his chair and took a deep breath. His mother had always been like this. In his childhood, when neighbors were unkind, when strangers judged their poverty, when the world felt cold, she would never respond with anger. She would simply walk forward with dignity. Now, here in this restaurant, she showed the same strength again. Keanu lowered his eyes to the table and thought about his own life. People often thought they knew him, an actor, a star, someone with fame and wealth. But behind that was a life filled with pain, loss, and loneliness. His father had left. His sister had suffered. He had lost people he loved deeply. And yet, every time his mother was there. She gave him hope when he had none. She gave him courage when he was weak. She gave him humility when success could have made him arrogant. So why should he let anger control him now? Why should he give power to the disrespect of one careless person when his mother herself refused to give it importance? The food came late, and the waiter dropped the plate with a clumsy sound. Keanu wanted to react, but his mother placed her hand lightly on his arm. "It is all right," she whispered softly. Her voice was steady, her eyes peaceful. That small gesture was more powerful than any speech. It was a reminder that strength is not in shouting or fighting, but in holding dignity, in staying calm, in showing that no one can take away your self-respect unless you let them. As they ate, Keanu felt the fire in his chest cool down. But in its place, something new grew, an understanding, a lesson, and a deep inspiration. Anger had been his first reaction, but his mother's calm strength transformed it into something else. He realized that people in the world would always show disrespect, arrogance, or ignorance. But what truly defined a person was how they responded. He looked at her across the table. "You are amazing," he said quietly. She smiled, the kind of smile that carried years of wisdom. "Life is too short to waste on anger," she replied. "We can choose peace. We can choose kindness. And when we do, we show others that they cannot control who we are." Her words sank deep into his heart. Keanu's thoughts wandered to the many people who followed his life, who admired him, who looked at him as someone strong. He wondered if they knew that his true strength did not come from fame or success. It came from the lessons his mother had taught him. And now, in this restaurant, he understood another lesson, one that he would carry with him and share with others. By the time they left the restaurant, his anger was gone. Instead, he walked with his mother, feeling proud of her dignity and calm. He knew this moment would stay with him forever, not as a memory of disrespect, but as a memory of how respect can be preserved, even when others fail to give it. He thought to himself, maybe this is what the world needs to see. Not just stories of pain or anger, but stories of how love, humility, and resilience can turn pain into power. And in that quiet walk home, Keanu Reeves made a silent promise. He would not let anger rule his heart. He would carry his mother's lesson and turn every moment of pain into inspiration for others. The night after the restaurant incident, Keanu could not sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the soft glow of the city lights slipping in through his window. His mind replayed the scene again and again, the careless tone of the waiter, the way his mother had lowered her eyes, and the calm strength she had shown. He remembered the fire inside his chest, the urge to stand up and fight, and how her gentle hand on his arm had changed everything. But even though his anger had cooled, something else began to rise in him. It was not fury anymore. It was a sense of responsibility, a quiet voice inside him saying, "This lesson is not only for you. This lesson is for the world." The next morning, he walked into his kitchen where his mother was making tea. She moved slowly, humming softly, her face glowing with peace as if last night had never happened. "You did not sleep, did you?" she asked gently, without even turning around. She always knew. "No," he admitted. "I kept thinking about what happened. I kept thinking about you." She poured the tea, set it on the table, and sat down. "Then think carefully," she said, "because in every moment of disrespect, there is a chance to teach respect. In every insult, there is a chance to rise. What you do with it matters more than what is done to you." Her words stayed with him as he prepared for his day. Keanu had meetings, scripts to read, and people to meet. But behind every conversation, he carried that quiet storm inside him. An awareness of how often people around the world faced disrespect, humiliation, and silence. Not everyone had his mother's strength. Not everyone could walk away with dignity. And maybe, he thought, maybe he could do something to show them that dignity was stronger than anger. The first test came sooner than he expected. Later that afternoon, he attended a meeting with producers about a new film project. The room was filled with people in suits, talking about numbers, schedules, and market predictions. But in the middle of the discussion, Keanu noticed one of the young assistants. She was bringing coffee, carrying notes, doing her best to move quietly around the room. One of the producers snapped at her harshly when she placed the coffee cup slightly off-center on the table. "Can't you even do this right?" the man muttered, not caring that everyone heard. Keanu froze. The scene felt like a mirror of the restaurant, except this time, it was not his mother. It was a stranger. A young woman who instantly lowered her head, whispered an apology, and hurried away as if she wanted to disappear. The room went silent for a moment, but then the conversation continued as if nothing had happened. No one spoke up. No one defended her. Keanu felt the old fire rising again. His hands curled into fists under the table, his jaw tightened. He could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. But then, once more, he remembered his mother's calm face. He remembered her words. "What you do with it matters more than what is done to you." When the meeting ended, Keanu excused himself and went out into the hallway. He found the assistant standing near the elevator, holding back tears. She quickly wiped her face when she saw him. "I am sorry, sir," she whispered. "I should not have—" "Stop," he said gently. "You have nothing to apologize for." She looked at him in surprise. "People will often treat others badly when they feel powerful," he continued. "But their disrespect does not define you. Your worth is not measured by how they speak to you. You are more than this moment." Her eyes widened. No one had ever said such words to her before. She nodded slowly, tears still shining, but mixed now with gratitude. That moment reminded Keanu why his mother's lesson was so important, because disrespect was not rare. It was everywhere, in restaurants, in offices, in meetings, in streets, and most people did not have anyone to tell them that their dignity remained untouched. In the days that followed, Keanu found himself paying more attention. He noticed things he had ignored before. The way a security guard was treated like he was invisible. The way a janitor was spoken to with impatience. The way a driver was scolded for something small. The world was full of arrogance. And yet in all that noise he began to see something else. Small sparks of kindness. A stranger holding the door for an old man. A child giving up her seat for a tired woman. A worker sharing his sandwich with someone who had none. These moments were quiet, but they were powerful. Keanu realized that his anger could only grow darker if he focused on disrespect alone. But if he chose to see the kindness too, then his heart would stay balanced. And so he began to make a silent practice. Whenever he felt the fire rise inside him, he would stop, breathe, and ask himself, "How can I turn this anger into something that gives hope?" One evening, while walking through the city streets, he saw a man yelling at a homeless person who had asked for change. The man shouted cruel words and pushed past him. The homeless man lowered his head, not saying a word. Keanu walked up, sat down beside him, and shared a small meal he had in his bag. He listened to the man's story. He discovered he was once a musician, someone who had lost everything after an accident. They sat there for hours, and Keanu realized, once again, that the greatest gift he could give was not money or fame, it was listening, respect, and kindness. But the world did not let him stay in peace. Soon, a bigger storm arrived. A magazine published a story about him, twisting the restaurant incident into something it was not. They wrote that Keanu had caused a scene, that he had shouted at staff, that he had used his fame to demand special treatment. None of it was true, but the headline was bold, and the gossip spread fast. Friends called him, asking if it was real. Strangers on social media judged him, some with anger, some with disappointment. It felt like the world was turning against him for something he had not done. For a moment, he felt the fire again, stronger than ever. His name was being dragged, his truth was being buried, and his heart was screaming to fight back. But then, once more, he remembered his mother's words. What you do with it matters more than what is done to you. He sat with his mother that evening, showing her the magazine. She read it quietly, then looked up at him with calm eyes. "Does this article change who you are?" she asked. "No," he said slowly. "Does it change the truth of what happened?" "No." "Then why give it power?" Her words cut through the storm again. He realized that sometimes the world will believe lies. Sometimes the truth will be buried under noise, but a person's character is not proven by gossip. It is proven by how they live, day by day, with kindness, humility, and resilience, and so he did not release a statement. He did not fight back with anger. Instead, he continued his silent practice. He treated people with respect. He spoke with kindness. And slowly, people began to see the truth not through his words, but through his actions. Because in the end, actions speak louder than headlines. That night, as Keanu walked home through the quiet streets, he thought about his promise. He had chosen not to let anger rule him. He had chosen to let inspiration grow from pain. And though the road ahead would bring more tests, he felt ready. Because he knew that strength was not about shouting the loudest. It was about staying calm in the storm and showing others that dignity cannot be taken away. The days after the false magazine story felt heavy, like carrying a shadow that followed Keanu wherever he went. On film sets, people whispered softly when he passed. In public places, some looked at him with doubt, others with curiosity. Social media kept repeating the same false picture of him, twisting his calm silence into weakness. He was tempted to break it all with one strong statement, but his mother's voice inside him kept him grounded. "Truth does not shout," she had said once. "Truth simply waits, and in time, it shines brighter than lies." But even as he tried to hold on to that wisdom, the pressure inside him grew. One evening, he was at a charity event for children, fighting cancer. This was something deeply close to his heart, something that gave him peace, because he could give back quietly without cameras. But that evening, when he arrived, a reporter pushed a microphone into his face and asked loudly, "Keanu, is it true you mistreat service workers? Is it true you use your fame to control people?" The children and their families were right there, watching. Keanu froze. His chest tightened. He wanted to shout, to say, "No, that is not who I am." But then he looked at the children. There, small faces, pale from treatment, still shining with innocent hope. He realized that his anger would only take away their moment of joy. So he took a deep breath, smiled at the children, and ignored the reporter. Instead, he walked over, sat down with one of the kids, and began to play with her toy car. The cameras caught that moment. Not his anger, not his defense, but his quiet choice to focus on kindness instead of noise. The next morning, the same magazine posted pictures of him with the children. They wrote another story, this time calling him the quiet star who cared more about people than about his own image. The lies did not vanish, but the truth began to break through slowly, like sunlight through clouds. Yet even as this relief came, another test arrived, harder, sharper, more personal. One night, Keanu was walking home when he saw two young men near the subway entrance. They were mocking an old man who was selling flowers. The old man's hands trembled as he held out the roses, but instead of buying, they laughed at him, called him useless, and pushed his small basket. Flowers spilled onto the ground. Keanu felt something snap inside. This was not just disrespect. This was cruelty. His fists tightened. For a brief second, the old fire roared inside him. He wanted to step forward, to grab those men, to shout until they felt shame. His body moved before his mind, and he took a step forward. But then, his eyes caught the old man's face. The man was not fighting back. He was bending slowly, carefully picking up each flower with shaky hands. His silence was not weakness. It was resilience. Keanu stopped. He took a deep breath, walked past the young men, and knelt down beside the old man. Together, they picked up the roses. When they were done, Keanu bought every flower in the basket. The old man's eyes filled with tears, and he whispered, "Thank you, son." The two young men walked away, silent, their laughter gone. They had seen something they did not expect: dignity in action. As Keanu walked away with the flowers in his arms, he thought about what just happened. Anger would have created another fight. Kindness created a lesson. Maybe those young men would never forget the sight of a man who chose compassion instead of rage. That night, he placed the flowers on his mother's table. She looked at them with surprise. "These are beautiful," she said softly. "They are more than flowers," he replied. "They are a reminder that dignity wins." His mother nodded, her eyes glowing with pride. "You are learning," she whispered. But the world was not finished testing him. Soon, a bigger challenge came, not from strangers, not from reporters, but from within his own circle. A close friend, someone he trusted for years, betrayed him. The friend gave false stories to the media in exchange for money. Lies spread once again, this time from someone Keanu loved like family. When he found out, the pain cut deeper than any insult from strangers. He sat in silence, holding the truth in his hands, wondering how someone he trusted could do this. For hours, he battled with himself. Part of him wanted to confront the friend, to demand answers, to let anger speak. Another part of him remembered his promise, to turn anger into inspiration. His mother found him sitting alone. She touched his shoulder and said, "Betrayal hurts most when it comes from those we love, but do not let their choice decide your heart. Their betrayal is their burden. Your dignity must remain yours." He closed his eyes and let her words sink in. The next day, instead of exposing his friend or fighting back, he let the truth quietly surface on its own. People who truly knew him began to speak out, defending him. Slowly, the lies lost power. And though the friendship was broken, his peace remained. Still, the pain of betrayal lingered in his heart. He realized that respect was not only about strangers or service workers, it was also about how we respond to those who hurt us most. And so another layer of his journey unfolded. The betrayal of his close friend left a scar on Keanu's heart. No matter how calm he tried to remain, the quiet ache was there. Trust was something he rarely gave, and now even that small trust had been broken. Nights felt longer, and silence felt heavier. Yet he kept reminding himself of his mother's words, that dignity was not about what others did to him, but how he chose to respond. For weeks, he threw himself into work. On film sets, he gave his full energy. During charity events, he poured his heart into listening and helping. He smiled in front of others, but inside, he was still fighting the fire of disappointment. It was not easy to carry the weight of betrayal, the sting of lies, and the endless whispers of the media. Then came a night that would test him more than ever before. Keanu had agreed to attend a live talk show. It was meant to be about his upcoming film, but he knew how these shows worked. They often used drama to grab attention. Still, he believed he could handle it with patience. The studio lights were bright. The audience clapped as he walked onto the stage, and the host greeted him with a wide smile that felt more like a mask. For a while, the questions were safe, about his career, his roles, and his experiences. But then, the host leaned forward with a sly grin and asked, "So, Keanu, people say you have a temper. Some say you lash out at those who don't treat you the way you want. Is it true that you made a scene at a restaurant because of your mother?" The audience gasped softly. The air turned heavy. Keanu felt his chest tighten. His heart pounded. The memory of that night came rushing back. The waiter's disrespect, his mother's calm hand, his own silent promise. Now, here it was again, twisted into something ugly, thrown at him in front of millions. For a second, the old fire blazed inside. He wanted to shout, to tell the host how wrong he was, to silence the laughter he could already hear from some corners of the audience. But then, almost like a whisper inside his soul, he remembered his mother's calm voice. What you do with it matters more than what is done to you. He took a slow breath. The silence stretched. The audience waited. The host leaned in, expecting drama. Finally, Keanu spoke. His voice was calm, steady, and quiet, but it carried weight. What happened that night was not about anger. It was about respect. My mother taught me that dignity is stronger than any insult. She showed me that silence can be louder than shouting. So no, I did not create a scene. I learned a lesson, and I will never forget it. The room fell silent. The host blinked, caught off guard by the calm answer. Some in the audience clapped softly. Others simply stared. Keanu did not look at the cameras or the host. He just let his words hang in the air, clear and true. After the show, as he walked out, reporters rushed toward him, shouting questions. But something had shifted. Instead of accusing, some were asking, "What lesson did your mother teach you? How did you stay calm in that moment?" The story began to change, not because he fought back with anger, but because he answered with truth and humility. Yet, the test was not over. A week later, Keanu was walking through a busy street when a group of men recognized him. One of them shouted loudly, "Hey, movie star! Where's your temper now? Are you gonna shout at us too?" They laughed, mocking him in front of a growing crowd. Phones came out, recording every second. He stopped. The fire burned again, stronger this time. Humiliation in public was not easy to carry. He could feel every eye on him, waiting to see if he would break his calm promise. His fists curled, his jaw tightened, his whole body wanted to react. But then, in the corner of his vision, he saw a small boy holding his mother's hand. The boy looked at him with wide eyes, as if searching for an answer, as if wondering how a man should act when provoked. In that moment, Keanu understood. This was not about him anymore. It was about what others would learn from how he responded. He unclenched his fists, looked at the men, and simply said, "I hope one day you learn that respect is more powerful than mockery." Then he turned and walked away. The crowd was stunned. The men fell silent, and the boy, still holding his mother's hand, smiled faintly, as if he had just seen a lesson he would remember for life. Keanu walked on, his heart still burning, but filled now with something else too: strength. He realized that every time the world tried to pull him into anger, he was being given another chance to inspire. That night, his mother listened as he told her what happened. She smiled softly and said, "You are learning to carry the fire without letting it burn you. This is true strength." He thought about her words long into the night. Maybe all these tests were shaping him for something even greater, something he could not yet see. And deep inside, he knew that the biggest storm was still ahead. The night after the public humiliation, Keanu sat alone by his window, staring at the city lights. The streets below were noisy, full of people, cars, and life. But inside his apartment, it was silent. Too silent. Silence could heal, but it could also remind him of all the pain he had carried through the years. He thought of his father who had abandoned them, of his sister who had suffered through illness, of the loved ones he had lost. Now on top of that came betrayal, lies, and endless tests of his patience. He whispered to himself, "How much more can I take?" His mother, who had always been his anchor, noticed the change in him. She saw the heaviness in his eyes, the way his shoulders carried invisible weight. One evening, she sat beside him, placed her hand on his, and said, "My son, storms do not come to destroy you. They come to clear your path. Do not mistake the storm for punishment. It may be preparing you for something greater." Keanu wanted to believe her. But the days ahead brought him the greatest challenge yet, one that would test his soul more than any humiliation ever could. It began when his mother fell ill. At first, it was small. She grew tired more quickly, her steps slower. Then the doctors spoke in gentle but heavy tones, explaining that her heart was weak and that her days might be limited. The world seemed to crash around him. This was the woman who had given him everything, who had stood strong through every hardship, who had been his guide and his light. Now, he faced the possibility of losing her. The anger he had kept under control for so long began to return, stronger than before. He felt anger at the unfairness of life, anger at the doctors who could not fix her, anger at fate for daring to take her away. For the first time since the restaurant night, he felt close to breaking his promise. He sat at her bedside one evening, watching her sleep, his chest tight, his fists clenched. He whispered, "Why does life always take from me? Why her?" She opened her eyes slowly, as if she had heard his heart more than his words. "Do not let anger steal these moments," she said softly. "Every breath, every smile, every hand you hold, these are gifts. If you spend them in anger, you will lose what little time we have." Her words struck him like lightning. In that moment, he realized the greatest test was not about strangers, lies, or betrayal. It was about holding on to peace when faced with the pain of losing someone he loved most. So, he made a choice. Instead of drowning in anger, he would turn his time into love. Every day, he sat by her side. He cooked her favorite meals, even if she ate only a little. He read her stories, the same ones she used to read him when he was a child. He took her on slow walks in the garden, holding her hand carefully, letting her feel the sun on her face. He did not waste those moments in anger at what was coming. He filled them with gratitude for what was still here. But the world outside did not stay quiet. Rumors spread again. Some said Keanu had withdrawn from films because he was unstable. Others mocked him for being too quiet, too soft. In the past, this would have burned him, but now, sitting by his mother's side, he saw clearly. Those voices did not matter. What mattered was the warmth of her hand in his, the sound of her laughter, the lessons she whispered even when her strength was fading. One night, when she felt strong enough to speak for longer, she told him, "When I am gone, people will still test you. They will disrespect you. They will betray you. They will twist your truth. But remember, anger is a fire that burns only the one who carries it. Let your heart be water. Let it flow. Let it cool. Let it give life." He held those words deep inside, like treasures. Then came the hardest day. Her time came quietly, in the middle of the night. She left with peace, her hand resting in his, her face calm as if she was only sleeping. Keanu sat there, tears streaming down his face, feeling as if a part of his soul had been torn away. For hours, he did not move, holding her hand long after her last breath, unable to let go. The old fire returned with a vengeance. He wanted to scream at the heavens, to rage at life, to fight against everything that had taken her. But then, in the middle of his storm, he remembered her last words. "Let your heart be water." And so, instead of screaming, he sat in silence. Instead of breaking, he chose to carry her lessons forward. He decided that her life, her dignity, her strength would not end with her passing. It would live through him, through every act of kindness, through every calm choice, through every moment he chose peace over anger. The days after her passing were some of the hardest he had ever faced. But slowly, something began to change. People who saw him noticed his calm, his humility, his quiet strength. They began to share his story. Not of anger, not of rage, but of a man who carried pain with dignity, who turned loss into love, who lived by the lessons of his mother. And without realizing it, Keanu was becoming an inspiration. Not because he was a star, not because he had fame, but because he showed the world that even in the face of the deepest pain, respect and kindness could still guide the heart. The days after his mother's passing were heavy with silence. Keanu carried her lessons inside him, but the absence of her voice, her hand, her presence felt unbearable. He walked through his home and felt the emptiness in every corner. The flowers on the table had dried. The chair where she sat was now empty, and every memory echoed with both love and loss. But slowly, as weeks passed, something began to shift. Letters started arriving at his home. People wrote to him after hearing whispers of how he had cared for his mother in her final days. Some were strangers who had lost their parents. Others were young people struggling with anger or loneliness. They wrote of how his quiet dignity gave them strength, how his calm choices gave them hope. Keanu sat one evening reading those letters, tears falling silently. He realized that his mother's words were true. Storms did not come only to destroy. They cleared paths, and her passing, painful as it was, had cleared a path for him to step forward, not just as an actor, but as a voice of kindness and resilience. Soon, he was invited to speak at a community gathering. At first, he hesitated. He was not a man who enjoyed the spotlight outside of his films. He preferred silence to speeches. But then he remembered his mother's teaching. In every moment of disrespect, there is a chance to teach respect. In every insult, there is a chance to rise. Maybe this was his chance. The night of the gathering, the hall was full. People came not to hear about his movies, but to hear about his life. Keanu walked onto the stage slowly, holding no notes, no script. He stood for a moment in silence, letting his heart settle. Then, he spoke. "My mother taught me that anger is easy, but respect is stronger. When someone disrespected her in a restaurant, she showed me that silence carries more power than shouting. When the world spread lies about me, she reminded me that the truth does not need to scream. When betrayal broke my heart, she told me to let my dignity remain mine. And when I was losing her, she gave me her final lesson, that anger burns the one who holds it, but kindness gives life." The hall was silent. Some people had tears in their eyes. Others nodded slowly as if they too carried similar pain. Keanu looked at them and continued. "We cannot control how others treat us, but we can control how we respond. We can let anger destroy us, or we can turn it into inspiration for others. I am trying every day to choose inspiration." The applause that followed was not loud or wild. It was soft, steady, and full of respect. From that night, his story began to spread further. People did not just talk about Keanu the actor. They talked about Keanu the man who carried pain with dignity. His words reached schools, communities, and even prisons, where people struggling with rage found comfort in his lessons. But as his message grew, so did the resistance. Not everyone wanted to see kindness win. Some mocked him, calling him weak, saying he was only pretending to be humble. Others tried to provoke him in public, hoping to catch him breaking his calm. One evening, at an event, a man stood up in the crowd and shouted, "You are a liar! You hide your anger, but we all know the truth. You are no different from anyone else. Stop pretending." The hall fell silent. All eyes turned to Keanu. Inside, the fire rose once again. He could feel the sting of the words, the pull of old anger. But he remembered the boy in the crowd weeks ago who had looked to him for an example. He remembered his mother's whisper, "Let your heart be water." So he looked at the man and said softly, "You are right about one thing. I am no different from anyone else. I feel anger, I feel pain, I feel loss. But my mother taught me that what matters is not the fire inside, but what you do with it. I am not pretending to be calm. I am practicing it every day. And sometimes I fail. But I will keep trying because the world needs more peace, not more anger." The hall erupted in applause, not because he fought the man, but because he admitted his humanity. He did not claim to be perfect. He claimed only to be trying. And in that honesty, people found strength. As the event ended, a young woman approached him. She had tears in her eyes and said, I was ready to give up on life. But hearing you tonight reminded me that pain does not have to destroy me. Thank you." Keanu held her hand gently, his heart heavy, but hopeful. He realized in that moment that his mother's lessons had not only saved him, they were now saving others through him. That night, as he walked home under the quiet stars, he whispered, "Thank you, Mom. Your lessons live on." Yet deep inside, he knew his journey was not complete. There was still one final test waiting, one that would challenge everything he had learned and reveal whether he could truly carry his mother's legacy to the very end. The months after Keanu began sharing his mother's lessons were filled with both light and shadow. People wrote to him, thanking him for reminding them that kindness was not weakness. He became a quiet symbol of dignity, someone who showed that fame and humility could live in the same heart. Yet, as his message grew, so did the challenges. For every person who admired him, there were others waiting to test him, to see if he would break. The final test came one night when Keanu least expected it. He was attending a fundraiser event for a children's hospital. The hall was grand, filled with important guests, donors, and cameras. Everything seemed calm until a man, drunk and angry, forced his way toward the stage. He shouted insults loudly, not just at Keanu, but at his mother's memory. "Your mother was nothing," the man screamed. "You pretend to be humble, but you are just a fraud." The words cut through Keanu's chest like knives. His heart pounded, his fists tightened, and for the first time in a long time, he felt himself trembling with uncontrollable rage. To insult him was one thing, but to insult his mother, the woman who had been his guide, his light, his everything, this was unbearable. The crowd gasped. Some people shouted for security. Others waited, eyes fixed on him, wondering how he would respond. Inside, two voices battled. One voice screamed for him to fight, to defend his mother's honor with anger, to silence the insult with force. The other voice, the softer one, was his mother's. "What you do with it matters more than what is done to you. Let your heart be water." Tears filled his eyes. He looked at the man, then at the children in the room, the families, the cameras. He knew that in this moment his choice would not only define him, but would also decide if his mother's lessons were truly alive in him. Slowly he stepped forward. The hall went silent. He looked at the man with steady eyes and said, "You can insult me. You can insult my name, but you cannot take away the truth of who my mother was. She was kindness, she was strength, and she was dignity. Your words cannot change that. They only show your own pain." The man froze. The crowd erupted in applause, not because Keanu fought, but because he chose compassion. Security led the man away, but Keanu did not follow with anger. Instead, he closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and let the storm pass. After the event, people came to him with tears in their eyes. One woman said, "Tonight you showed us what true strength looks like." Another whispered, "Your mother must be so proud." Later, alone in his room, Keanu sat quietly, thinking about what had happened. For the first time, he realized the truth. His anger had not vanished. It still lived inside him, but he had learned to carry it without letting it control him. That was the lesson his mother had been teaching all along. He whispered into the silence, "Mom, I hope I made you proud tonight." And in the stillness, he felt her presence, not in voice, not in form, but in the calm peace that filled his heart. From that day forward, Keanu no longer saw anger as his enemy. He saw it as a fire that could either destroy or warm. He chose to use it to bring light, not darkness. He continued his work quietly, helping people, inspiring strangers, reminding the world that respect, humility, and kindness were not signs of weakness but of true strength. His story became not just about an actor, not just about fame, but about a son who carried his mother's lessons into the world, turning pain into power and anger into inspiration. And so, the journey that began in a restaurant with a simple moment of disrespect became a path that touched millions. It was proof that even the smallest choice, to stay calm, to show kindness, to carry dignity, could change not only one life, but many.